All right. Now, remember, this is qualitative data, so we can represent this qualitative data in many different ways. The first way we're going to look at here is a bar graph. So I'm sure you're familiar with a bar graph. And so let's just talk about this. Make sure we're all on the same page and that we all agree with it. A bar graph is constructed by labeling the category on either a horizontal or vertical axis. It doesn't matter. You can go horizontal or you can go vertical. And the frequency or relative frequency, we could do either one. It doesn't have to be the same thing. Okay, of the category on the other axis. Rectangles of equal width are drawn for each category, and the height represents either the frequency or relative frequency. So here's the data that we just looked at on those rehab body parts. So our body part, it's qualitative, so that's what's going to go on that horizontal axis. It doesn't have to go horizontal, it could go on the vertical axis because bar graphs can go side to side or they can go up and down. This particular one goes up, and notice it says frequency and relative frequency. Look at what happens. If I were able to pick this up, scoot it over, and put it on top, don't you see how those would look the same? Cool, right? Here's the other kicker that I want to point out to you. These start at 0. Pay attention to that. A true bar graph will start at 0. If it does not start at 0, it is not an accurate bar graph because it's messing with the scale. Sometimes bar graphs, you'll have this and they'll put a little like symbol, like a break symbol on there, and then they'll have the numbers that are listed going up, whatever those numbers are. All right. Yeah, but that looks like skewed data. So we're learning about these different pieces of how to show statistics. I want you to have a good working knowledge of what is appropriate, what should happen as you're making your own bar graphs as you go off and do your research and write this stuff up. Start that bad boy at 0. If you're looking at what somebody else has produced, make sure that they're doing this accurately. If not, that is your way to discern what is appropriate, what's not appropriate, so you're not looking at some skewed data. All right, I want you to be informed consumers. I know I keep beating that drum, same thing over and over again, and that's important, and that's part of this class is looking at that informed consumer. Okay, so I'll quit harping on that, and oopsie daisy, let me scoot this up. Here's another type of chart. This is just nice info. This is called a Pareto chart. Now, a Pareto chart, it's not used very often. Most of the time when you have a chart, it looks like this. I just want you to be aware this is a type of bar graph, and it's just drawn in descending order. That's it. So decreasing order. So you start with the most, and then it just goes down in order. That's all that's happening here. It's qualitative data, so the order down here doesn't matter on these particular ones. So that's the deal with a qualitative chart. You can have this Pareto chart and it doesn't matter. Over here, this is just happens to be the order that it was in on the chart. You can rewrite these because they have not like a value or significance. So you can rewrite them. No, I mean, nothing other than the fact, just another way to organize. That's all it is. I'm going to write just another way to organize. They're not used a whole lot. It's really not that big a deal. Sometimes it's nice just to have the visual representation to say, oh, this one is obviously the most. I mean, you could look at this chart and see it. But then if you just want to be able to look down here and say, okay, which one is the most, which one is the least, then you can see that. However, these are all three the same, right? But then here you can see, oh, all three of these are the same. Oh, these are the same also. And then these are different as they go down in order. It's just reorganizing it depending on what you want to look and see. That's all that it is. All right. Okay. Now, here's another one that I want to take a look at. So we're just going to kind of talk through this. We're going to look at some more bar graphs, but this is different information. So I want to compare two sets of data. That's what this is all about. So we're going to look at the educational attainment in 1990 and in 2017 of 20 adults that are 25 or older who are in the U.S. So here's also, sometimes this happens when you have great big huge numbers. This is just put in the millions is kind of what this is. So 39,344 is the same thing as 39,344,000. That way they're just not having to write a whole bunch of zeros and make my chart super big because you're just stuck with a bunch of zeros on the end of all of these. It's just a different way to write this out. All right, so just be aware this is really talking in the millions that we're going for here. So in 1990 data, 2017 data, this is an actual frequency chart because it's the numbers. Over here is a relative frequency chart. Still not a high school graduate, exact same categories, exact same numbers. This one's just the relative frequency and this one's just the actual frequency. All right. Now let's look at, we want a side-by-side relative frequency bar graph of the data. And on the next page, I've got that for you. This is back when we're talking about, here I can have the vertical bars or I can have the horizontal bars. Notice, relative frequency, literally the same data. Literally the exact same thing. All right? And we're not getting anything different. I'm just wanting to show you that you can look at the same data. Sometimes it's nice to see, oh, what is this vertically and how does this affect each other? Oh, what is this horizontally? Sometimes it's easier to see that way. The exact same on the different axes. Literally the same deal. Oh, do you see that? Okay, so I wanted to be very clear about that. These are not two separate graphs. It's literally the exact same data, both of which are relative, relative frequency here. Okay, now let's look at this. What can we come up with based on this data? What do you see? Between 1990 and 2017. So not necessarily between these two graphs. You can look at either one. But what do you see? So in 1990, these are the values that happened. In 2017 is the green on both of these charts. Sometimes I think it's nice to look at this one because I say, oh, how far out are we going? Ooh, check it out. A high school diploma completion in 1990 was higher. But once we start getting into 2017, the not high school was higher, fewer. Here, made it through high school. Here we just had high school. Fewer finished. So this is educational attainment. This doesn't mean what did you get. This means what's the highest level that you got. Okay, so does that make more sense? Okay, so the highest level in 1990, more didn't even get a high school or just completed high school, right? These numbers are really big over here in 1990. The farther we get out here in 2017 with our numbers, notice how this green column, the higher we're getting over here later in timeline, higher degrees make more of an impact. In 1990, these numbers were really big. It's getting more and more in 2017. Do you see how that plays out? Okay, that's our conclusion. Fewer drops from high school, more completing degrees in 2017. In 2017, more higher ed degrees and fewer, notice this, not even a high school grad, how much lower that is. And fewer high school drops. Nice. Right? So you just see basically reading the graph. That's what I want to push for you to look at right here. Okay, so that's what we're looking at in this section. There's all different kinds of graphs that we can be looking at. Bar graphs, I think we covered that. Now let's look at a different kind, a pie chart. So a pie chart is a circle divided into sectors. A circle, because it's a pie, right? Divided into sectors. Each sector represents a category of data, and the area of the sector is proportional, there's that word proportion again, to the frequency of the category, right? Proportions are going to be a huge deal for us, so I want to make sure that we're good with that. So it is divided into those different categories. So if we're constructing a pie chart, the data represented in tables 4 and 5 represent the educational attainment. Those are these tables on the other page. Same data that we're looking at, we're just putting it into a pie chart here. All right, same thing, it's the bureaus and thousands. So construct a pie chart of the data. Now here's the thing. The degree of each sector, if we were going to get a protractor out, then the degree that's in here, that's going to be that's what it's talking about, that degree that we're going to look at. I'm not going to have you do an actual construction of a pie chart. We're just going to look at them and glean the data from them. We're not going to go old school on it. That's what we have Excel and all these wonderful programs to do for us. That's nice to look at this to see the degree, because the higher the degree, the bigger the piece of the pie, right? But we also know that the higher the frequency, the bigger the piece of the pie, and the higher the relative frequency, because that all goes together. Do you see what's going down here? Now, notice in my pie chart, I have percentages. So, look at this. Not a high school graduate is 12%. Not a high school graduate is 0.1201. If I were to change that decimal into a percent, that would be 12%. Do you see how that's playing out? Nice. Okay, so the same kind of thing is happening here. Whatever the category is going to be that piece of the pie. So a bachelor's degree is 20%. And do you see how that's playing there? Now this is 0.1970. We're just rounding that to be 20%. Cool, right? Okay, so a pie chart, a bar graph, these are wonderful ways that you can represent that qualitative data. So just saying how much of each category that we're looking for, and then you can have a visual representation. A lot of times that's very helpful in terms of viewing the data and making sense of it. Cool.